I think we can kick it off. Simon, I will leave the virtual stage to you.
All right. Good morning, everybody. My name is Simon, Chief Innovation Officer at Copenhagen Fintech. I would like to welcome you all to this session on finance and fintech as a kind of economic stronghold position. We are welcoming participants as we speak, but we have a tight schedule. So we will start. I'll make a short intro to who we are as a cluster and why we're doing this session today. Then Thomas will follow up, speak about the trends in finance and fintech, where we see it. And then there'll be presentations from the industry. And after the break, also presentations from the research institutions. Purpose of today is to, I would say, matchmake and kickstart the matchmaking between the finance industry, the fintech industry, and the research institutions as part of finance and fintech being now and one of the stronghold positions in Denmark. So in the end, after the Q&A session, Thomas will be back and we'll talk about kind of the process following next to this, the process where we hope to be the matchmakers between the industry and research institutions, and where we can facilitate new projects done by the research institutions and fund them by money as part of the stronghold position. So by that, a little bit about Copenhagen Fintech. A lot of you know us as an organization, but we are non-profit organization founded in 2016. The goal and the vision behind it was very much building a cluster that could create and make Denmark centered around Copenhagen as a fintech hub in the global kind of scene of fintech hubs. We build our kind of cluster around different stakeholder groups. One is industry partners. And we have today already a strong group of industry partners, but we are to build upon that in the coming years. We also build on investor partners. Already today, also a lot of national, Nordic, international investor partners as part of our cluster. And then startups and startup programs. We run various startup programs and activities toward the startup scenes. And increasingly, we want to run partnerships also with universities. Just gonna move a little bit here, and this is what we are to kickstart today. But our kind of strength in this is also our knowledge and insights in what's going on in the industry, and increasingly our global network in the scene of fintech. So you take next slide, Thomas.
Yeah.
So just a quick one on us as a cluster. Also a little bit on me, and my background has very much been about building, analyzing, supporting cluster organizations for the last 20 years. What we want with Copenhagen Fintech and the vision behind establishing Copenhagen Fintech was very much using the energy and the renewal energy, the innovation energy from startups to renew the industry and the cluster. So this whole idea about industries working in silos after time has been kind of a challenge for clusters and industry in many different clusters. And what we want with this cluster is use the energy from startups to kind of keep renewing financial services. So if you take next slide, Thomas. And that whole kind of energy of startups is what is the core and the center of our cluster. We have, in the 4 or 5 years we've been running this, have seen a rapidly increase in the number of startups. We have gone from about 70 startups when we started up to about 270 today. And these numbers are kind of, I think what they kind of express is that there is an enormous energy in producing new use cases to renew financial services, and this is very much expressed in what the startups are doing. So our belief is that the startups are often first movers in taking technology and transforming that into new use cases. So we want to and we've been super close to that. Almost 150 startups has been developing their businesses in our Fintech Lab and around our activities, and that knowledge of how can you produce use cases, what we want to kind of match towards university research better in our new cluster approach. Next slide, Thomas. So building our cluster in general terms, I'll be very general here. We have our lab, which is both a physical place, but also, I would say, a name of what we kind of how we merge the different stakeholders and activities. In the core stakeholder groups around our lab, and in terms of innovation stakeholders, is the established financial industry, it's the startup scenes, it's the investors, and it's the R&D institutions. So these, when we look at our overall cluster approach, our activities is very much targeted towards these 4 stakeholder groups, and try in an attempt to kind of merge these together to create innovation. So when we look at research project, it's very much we very much try to link it towards the other activities we do, and in the end, what we are here for is creating innovation, growth, jobs, and when we look at financial services, this is very much done by scaling these tech services international. So we see a journey of kind of building building, supporting solutions in a Danish Nordic settings, but also very much focusing on how can we scale them international, how can we tell the story about Copenhagen, the Nordics, as a brand in the kind of the global scene, and also work with regulation. Next slide, Thomas. Our Fintech Lab, just to illustrate what we think this is about. This is the core of where many of our activities. We have housed today about 170 entrepreneurs in this building, more than 30 different nationalities. We have had almost 150 companies building their solutions in here and together with us, and together with each other also for the last 4 or 5 years. And that whole energy is and the buzz around that, I think that the insight you get from seeing these startups develop their solutions is very important for our cluster. Next slide, Thomas. So we've been building the cluster. There's a history going also before this, but since 2016, when we started Copenhagen Fintech, we have been kind of scaling our activities. We've been scaling our member group. We've been scaling our kind of range of programs. And where we are now is that we have established a lot of kind of pilots in different programs. For the coming 4 years, we are to scale them, professionalize them, and also match them much better up with research institutions in Denmark, but also international. Next slide. So the vision around our programs and how we want to build the clusters is very much focusing on our core stakeholder groups. For startups, we run programs from very early stage to scaling them into Asia, Japan, Kenya, Brazil, as we're doing at the moment. So we want to help the startups develop the solution, but we also very much want to help them scale. Corporates, financial institutions, we run a series of programs for them, which is very much on understanding their pain points, their challenges, and matching them up with new ideas from startups or new research from research institutions, and also a large group of investors, which of course is very much focusing on kind of helping them with insights in what goes on in the industry as well. But last part, university programs is in the build-up phase. So we want to facilitate and match industry research. We want to help universities in their entrepreneurial program. We want to tell the stories about fintech on the universities. We want the universities and the research institutions to run hackathons together with the industry. So that whole kind of series of programs is in the making. And that is what this sprint is very much about. And the last slide, Thomas. So today is our first of what we call our knowledge sprints. This is about matching what goes on at research institutions towards the challenges, the pain points of the industry. For us, this is kind of one brick in a growth puzzle, and we see it very much linked towards the other activities. When we're focusing on, for instance, impact, sustainability in the research and finance, we see a close link to our major events where we showcase this and invite the world to link towards our early stage startup program where we help specific startups in these areas. We see a close link to our scaling missions where we take these talented solutions and try to scale them to other regions in the world. So for us, it's about getting the bricks together, putting the bricks together, and create in the end growth, jobs, and innovation to help our cluster grow. I think that's end of my kind of brief presentation. But Thomas will now take over and talk a lot more kind of detailed on the trends we see in the fintech sector.
Yes, and thank you so much, Simon. And for those of you that don't know who I am, my name is Thomas. I'm the CEO of Copenhagen Fintech, and what I'm going to spend the next 15 minutes, hopefully, and a lot of slides, is going to take a little bit of an overview of what we see is happening and how we aggregate our knowledge of what's happening on a global level, and link that to what is going on in the Nordics, and of course also what's going on in Denmark. And after that, you will hear two industry experts talking about a little bit, from the industry perspective, what's going on when it comes to especially digitalization in the industry and in regards to sustainability and the green transition. So I think you will hear some of the same messages, but from various angles, which is also the purpose today. And then afterwards, also link that into what's going on at the universities. And in this case, this will be the University of Copenhagen. So let me just start out with trying to show you. This is actual numbers from a survey that Citibank has been doing. And this just shows the massive impact of financial services in technology. So this shows the biggest investor outside of technology itself, the biggest investor. You can see here insurance, and if you add that to banking and securities, you can see the biggest investor in artificial intelligence and in automation on a global scale is actually financial services. So a lot of research and development and a lot of billions of dollars is actually going into research and development into artificial intelligence and automation on a global scale. So the industry can really push the boundaries in that respect. If you look at also the biggest budgets when it comes to IT and technology, the financial services is also most certainly the industry that has the biggest budgets. And also, if you look at the highest median IT expense as a percent of revenues, you can see here it's almost 2 to 3 times the cost of other major industries. So there's no doubt, and that's what we want to leave you here first and foremost. There's no doubt that financial services is super interesting when it comes to development of new technologies, and there's also a lot of money going in to technology from that industry. So let me just jump quite ahead, and this is I'm gonna go through this quite fast. I think most of you guys in the call here have a pretty good understanding of what's going on in technology and also financial services. So I'll just try to put it together and say what, from a fintech perspective, what are with the thematic trends that we see from where we stand right now. So we operate with 4 overall trends, and then one that you can see is underpinning the 4 trends here. The 4 trends, as we see it, is embedded finance. It's disrupting wealth. This is the headlines. It's incumbent reinvention, and it's SME digitalization. I will go through them. I will go through them now and try to take go a bit deeper in these 4 trends, and end up in also talking about why financial services is super interesting in a broader perspective, especially when we talk around sustainability, which is also what we see is a Nordic stronghold when it comes to fintech, pairing fintech finance technology with sustainability initiatives. So if we start up with what we call embedded finance, what is also to some extent at least known as invisible banking or banking as a service, what we see here is this is what refers to enterprises across industry all of a sudden embedding financial services into their customer base and actually adopting many different fintech solutions. So we see fintech as moving from something that is going on only in financial services, banking, pension, insurance, to something that every industry needs to think about what is their play in financial technology. And as you can see here, one of the big investors from the Silicon Valley, Andreessen Horowitz, said, every company will be a fintech company, and the next bank does not have to start out as a bank. And I think that's also what we are beginning to see here. A lot of different players have an interest in what's going on in financial services. We will send out slides afterwards, so I won't go through them in detail, but just try to talk a little bit into some of these trends. I gave us a few examples of what we can see as the start of embedded banking. Some of the examples here you have just seen Ageas. Those are those that run, for instance, the cloud accounting software Billig Billing. They just raised 450 million to buy up similar services, but they also have a play in looking into opening up a challenger bank focusing on the SME segment. I think you have already you can already see, if you take a cloud accounting system or ERP system such as Economic, they are already collaborating with several fintechs. One of them is Moneyflow, where you can, when you send your invoice, you can get instant payment. We also recently saw a really interesting collaboration between Astralis, the gaming platform, or esports platform that hooked up with Luna, because there's most certainly a big affinity from Astralis players, and Luna wanted to exploit that kind of affinity with their platform, offering banking services and actually Astralis Bank to those customers. And then another one is Coop Forsikringer, which is a good example of how we see embedded insurance also, where we begin to see other industries also have a play in offering insurances to their customer base. So this is just some examples from the Danish Nordic ecosystem, where we can see how embedded finance are starting to take off. If we move on to the other one, disrupting wealth, I think this is another trend that we see here, which refers to kind of the overhaul of wealth management, and a lot of different startups that's tackling especially sustainability within wealth management, but also in general a more holistic approach to financial health and literacy. And that is very much driven by new generations entering. And I think if we move on here, some of the key drivers for that trend is that wealth is concentrated in the very hands of the very few. And this is just example of how this looks on a global scale. This is US numbers here, but I don't think that necessarily the Nordic or the Danish numbers are much different. I think what we will see here is a massive wealth transfer in the coming years from baby boomers to millennials. You see a very different way of relating to wealth, and there will so the whole kind of notion of wealth transfer is really going to drive a lot of different solutions and services in the space. And especially if you look towards millennials, you will see that there's a much more a bigger tendency to align values with how millennials invest, and which you can also see when it comes to aligning that with ESG or SDGs and so on and so forth. This just speaks into the enormous amount of money that are flowing into sustainable assets. And I know that my colleagues from Insurance and Pension and Finance Denmark will talk a lot more about that in their presentations also, how the industry. This is just examples of that. Some of the solutions that we see are now entering the market. If you see the one that is called the Many in the bottom, making investments into real estate, solar, green energy, making that much more accessible to the to common people for a low amount of money. We see Matter that is doing ESG screening of investments. See Doland that is making sustainable investments accessible for very few money. Gaia is another platform that just were announced and got investments. And then you have in the middle, you have another solution called Dream Plan that is offering a digital platform for a new way of financial advice, holistic financial advice. So you see a lot of different solutions now entering the market and challenging the existing players. And of course, you see a lot from the incumbent players that is also entering here with different services and offerings. If we go to incumbent reinvention, so of course, every financial institution around the globe is now in a massive transformation. This is the perfect storm of legacy technology that needs to be exchanged, increased regulation, definitely some trust issue, and so on and so forth. So we see a lot of digital transformation initiatives that needs to be supported, or where technology is in the core. This is, maybe some of you have already seen this. This is taking the homepage or the webpage of some of the US and the UK banks, and trying to unbundle the different services and try to match up with startups that are working in that space. So there's no doubt there's been a great unbundling going on, and what we see now is a rebundling. So different partnerships and collaborations between the different players, both established and startups disrupting the space. So this is very much a battle between what we could call startups and incumbent, and it comes down to whether the startup gets distribution, as it says here, before the incumbent gets innovation. So startups are looking for distribution, incumbents are looking for for innovation, and hopefully there's a perfect match there. And if you pair that with what's going on in research, I think we have a really interesting cocktail here that can lead Denmark and the Nordics in many years to come. This is also just to show that there is, a general uptake of these different technology solutions within finance. So this is some of it is our neighboring countries, and some is a little bit further away, which of course is also an illustration of different markets. Some of the examples of different solutions that are working together with the incumbent players in their digital transformation. Everything from the 2021 AI that just entered into a collaboration with Jyske Bank around implementing their platform and ethical guidelines in AI, to new banking identity is definitely a big thing here. Yesterday it was announced that our open banking platform, Nordic API Gateway, partnered up with BEC, representing 27 banks. Before that, it was Bankdata, representing 9 banks, I think. So when it comes to open data, open banking in the Nordics and Denmark is certainly in the lead. We have other examples here, Sobio that partnering up with Arbejdernes Landsbank, Spar Nord, Nordea, ABN AMRO, Nykredit, and so on and so forth, and Alchemy in the automation space. So different examples of how different solutions help incumbent players in a digital transformation. So fourth trend will be, we've seen the whole SME space maybe being the segment that hasn't really been serviced that much on a global scale. So different solution looking into helping SMEs digitize their business, the back office, is also a major trend that we see. SMEs, no need to go into that, represent a huge segment, especially in Europe, especially in Denmark and the Nordics. So it's definitely a segment that is too big not to serve. And there's a lot of different solutions and services that are now starting to entering that space. A few examples of that I've put in here, everything from alternative funding to helping expense management, to new salary systems, dashboards that helps SME getting a better overview of their finance, and into farming, different trading platforms that help farmers trade their goods and services. So many different solutions that is helping SMEs digitize their business. So these were the 4 thematic trends that we see. So the last one I will talk a little bit about is also how does sustainability play a factor here. There's no doubt, and I will not talk a lot about that because I know my industry colleagues here will talk a lot more about that. But there's no doubt that when it comes to sustainability and the focus we've had in the Nordics, some of the most sustainable countries in general are Nordic countries. Some of the most innovative countries are Nordic countries. Some of the countries that has really been leading the push in sustainability and towards the SDGs and come the first is actually Nordic countries. So if you pair that with also what's going on in finance, we really have an awesome cocktail here. This is just some of the examples of different companies that are working with sustainable solutions. And I think what is important here also to say is this is much broader. The financial sector is one of the most data-rich sectors. They're the ones that are lending money or financing sustainability initiatives. And just to give you an example how broad this is and what the finance sector is looking into now. ESG, of course, and ESG data on the whole supply chain is super interesting to provide that and combine that with the data that the financial sector already have. I took one example here from Christian Eagle, the professor at the Department of Computer Science in University of Copenhagen, and that is because I saw Christian's LinkedIn post around how they work with the imagery and trees and better understanding the ecosystem at a global scale. And that was the exact same day where we had a conversation with the Singaporean bank that are looking into exactly analyzing these kind of things in their loan portfolio. So they were very interested in some of the research that was going on in analyzing imagery. So this is much broader than just financial service and in isolated what's going on in finance or pension or insurances. So I think there's a lot of the research within sustainability that has a huge use case in financial services also. So bear that in mind also when we go forward. So sorry, I think that was the 2 cents from me on global trends, the 4 global trends and sustainability. I will now leave the floor, and I'll just change here. I can see there are some questions also. I will try to follow up on those also, while Seal from Insurance and Pension will tell you a little bit about their agenda in digital and sustainability. So let me just stop sharing here, and I will leave the virtual floor to you, Seal. And you, yeah.
Yes, thank you very much. I just had to unmute myself. Yes, let me just see if I can share my screen. Just a second. Should be right there. Can you actually see the notes and everything as well?
Yeah, you just need to.
Just a second. Just like that. Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Seal Flortoft, and I'm leading the Digitalisation department at Insurance and Pension Denmark. I've promised to talk a bit on a few topics on digitalisation in the insurance and pension sector at the moment. I'm going to touch on a few topics here. As you know, insurance has traditionally been a very conservative industry, but if there ever was an area that was well suited for digitalisation, it really is insurance and pensions, because there are no physical products and distribution can also be handled digitally. And also we see the growing access to data makes it a lot more easy to assess the risks when we do underwriting, and allows the insurers to focus much more on prevention of accidents instead of bearing the risk and having to pay the damages in the end. So we see the sector is now rapidly changing with the influx of new technologies and tech giants and innovative startups. So as I said, I'm going to focus on 4 topics which are very much in focus in the ongoing digitalisation in the sector. Sustainability, which is very much driven by the pension sector and the investments in sustainable companies with a responsible carbon footprint. And linked to sustainability is prevention and the whole prevention agenda. We see at the moment a great shift in the industry because the new digital tools allow insurance carriers to focus much more on preventing the accidents, because this gives so much more value to customers and society to prevent the accidents instead of just paying the damages when they've happened. Also, we see new data-driven business models that also allow for better customer service and rethinking of the whole distribution model within insurance, with focus on convenience and digital distribution. And last but not least, artificial intelligence is by far the fastest growing technology in the insurance sector at the moment, and it's being used in so many areas. So I'm going to touch a bit on that as well. As I said, the sustainability agenda is very much driven by the pension sector's investment in sustainable products and companies. And over the next 10 years, the pension sector has pledged to invest more than 350 billion Danish crowns in green sustainable assets. And these are invested with focus on the so-called ESG factors, the environmental, social, and governance factors. And the ability to analyze these data is very vital for our companies. And this also, like Thomas said, they started looking at how to assess the whole supply chain and how to assess the carbon footprints of a company that they might be investing in. So the non-financial information is used to look at behavior, which in turn, with investors' eyes, shows the opportunities and allows them to mitigate the risks with the assets. And it's also about credibility. So the classic financial data is really only a snapshot of financial performance, whereas the correct and reliable non-financial data that the sector wants to have access to is the new currency for the companies as we see it. So non-financial data really talks about the layers in the business model that the financial information doesn't say anything about. So the increasing focus on the consequences that a given business model can have on the surrounding society can also tell something about the financial consequences. So the investors demand insight into the layers of the business models. And in some cases, you see that there's business models that customers won't accept, for instance, fracking, or they demand that business models be adapted. So the consequences to the surrounding society is reduced. So the non-financial data must be reliable, so the investors know what they're buying into. So in this way, the data contributes to the fact that pricing of companies and products reflect the real preferences of the investors and customers, and really drives the green transition agenda in the society as a whole. We also see insurance and new distribution channels linked to the separate use of a product plays a supporting role in what we call the sharing economy, which again promotes a sustainable use of society's resources. For instance, that could be the whole shared car segment, where you get insurance as you drive. You don't have to have an insurance product for an entire year. You just use it whenever you actually use the car, or if you rent your apartment, or something else. And not so much with the digital focus, but nevertheless interesting, is the move we see in the sector towards a more sustainable use of resources. For instance, when customers file their claims, some insurance carriers are looking into, can we actually start to offer a used product to promote a better use, or more sustainable use of the society's resources? Will you accept a used iPhone when your own used iPhone is damaged or stolen? Or like one of the big insurance carriers that decided to start repairing plastic bumpers for cars instead of just throwing them out and replacing them with new ones, again to promote sustainability. So prevention is really an area where we see a lot of things going on at the moment. So we see a move towards ever more data-driven business models. And one of the most positive aspects is this in the focus on preventing damages. So the IoT technology keeps gaining momentum in the insurance industry, also including risk assessment and underwriting, and can really, if you think about it, empower insurance to move from their traditional role as risk protectors to risk prevention. And we see this development. We even have one company that has the declared purposes now to prevent instead of insure, which is a very interesting move for the sector, I think. We see a lot of products based on gamification models. You've probably all heard of the app and the dongle you get installed in cars, and you can track how people are driving to promote safer driving. And by sharing their data, the customers actually get a discount on their premium if they're safer drivers. Also, IoT supports insurance technology, and this is very interesting as well. We see it provides more accurate and real-time data, and gives a better opportunity to assess the risks, as I mentioned with the example with the cars. And the challenge there for the sector, I think, or the implementation for risk assessment with IoT solutions is analytics, because the data provided by IoT is real-time. Unfortunately, the real-time analytics still leaves much to be desired. So we expect a lot of innovation in this space as the market demand for IoT-driven analytics grows. Sensors of different sorts already plays a huge role, an important role. For instance, insurance of granaries is now possible because it's possible to monitor humidity in the grains in real time to avoid mold. And the same goes for installing sensors in houses that would measure humidity. It would enable the customers to avoid mold, water damages. So in general, we see a shift towards these prevention technologies. But also in terms of healthcare, the IoT solutions are actually very interesting. For instance, we see some insurance carriers looking into, could you have a rehabilitation program that would actually support your customer in rehabilitating from injuries, and you give them a wearable and they would be able to use the data from those to help more efficient training and rehabilitation. The sector is also, I know, looking into how to avoid injuries to the musculoskeletal system. So we see insurers that have actually developed digital ways of measuring the strain on different parts of the body. For instance, if you do repetitive work, and you can actually see which parts of the body is most strained, so you can give your customer preventive treatment in order to avoid these injuries. And then we see predictive analysis as a very interesting area, because the insurance are sort of looking into the amount of data they have on each customer. Will it actually be able to help them make predictions on who will need help, who's in danger of being stressed out or becoming ill because of lifestyle choices and so on. And then there's new distribution models and customer service. As we see competition becoming tougher, the incumbent insurers have to pick up their pace to remain competitive. Insurance has traditionally been sold through physical channels, through agents or brokers or call centers, and we see a very clear move towards digital first, digital self-service, and this is also the demand for better self-service has risen, particularly in this COVID-19 situations. So let me see, I'm running a bit short on time. Let me just make a quick jump to AI and data ethics, which is quite interesting, I think. Because insurance companies typically have massive amounts of data locked in legacy systems, and unlocking these will optimize the business and customer service and everything from claim handling to fraud detection. So we see that artificial intelligence is really changing the inner workings of insurance and already plays a significant role in the insurance industry. And this is, for instance, machine learning. You use that to automate the entire processes of claims handling. As files are becoming increasingly digitized, that could be easily analyzed using algorithms. And we also see that this, for instance, means that we can expand insurance cover to other areas of life insurance where people would not normally be covered, because people with well-managed chronic illnesses are actually able to be insured under certain conditions now because of AI. We also see the use of chatbots or voice bots based on conversational AI and virtual assistants that automate the customer interactions and answers most of the questions to reduce this volume of traffic that human support staff has to handle. So that makes them more efficient as well. Claims automation, handling of claims much more efficiently with the use of algorithms. For instance, we see the development of apps where you can, if you have a damage to your car, you take a photo, you send that to your insurance company through the app. The algorithm assesses the damage, handles the claim, pays out the damages, and it really is very efficient. Another area of great importance in which the sector has focused on is fraud detection. So it's estimated that up to 10% of all claims are fraudulent, and that means that I only have the numbers for 2018, but out of the 43 billion paid in damages, that would be 4 billion, more than 4 billion that actually are due to insurance fraud. So AI fraud detection solutions can tackle this fraud by analyzing massive amounts of data from multiple sources to spot the fraudulent claims, where they have pattern recognition on vehicle damage data that would not be recognizable under the previous systems, or you have software that can detect manipulated images from the internet that indicates that, for instance, the customer has actually sold the items prior to making the claims. And then again, we also see the sector looking much more at predictive analysis. For instance, this situation where the company could look at the data the company holds on customers to give an indication of whether you're at the risk of getting ill or in need of help or preventive treatment. And then the last thing I'm just going to touch briefly upon is the data ethical principles, because AI also, we're well aware, has ethical implications, and the sector developed a set of data ethical principles in 2019, but we're also looking at how to implement this in the governance and the use of AI. And I think that was my speed talk for now, Thomas.
Thank you, Sile. And I can see if you have, I know you have to join another meeting in 15 minutes, but I can see there's a big of comments or questions in the chat also. So maybe I can just ask you to stay 5 minutes more and just write a little bit with the guys that asked the questions or commented.
Sure.
Great. Then I will leave the floor to you, Niels Arne. Welcome, and I will mute myself, and you can start sharing your screen.
Thank you. Let me see. Now, so which screen do you have now?
We see your speaking notes. I'm not sure if this is the first slide, but maybe it is.
So let me see.
We see 4 out of 10. Yeah, exactly. We see, we see your speaker notes and stuff, but we can live with that. Okay, now it's good. Now it's good. It's perfect.
Excellent. Thank you. My first day at the office in a long time, so I've been working from home as many of the rest of you. Well, thank you for the opportunity to talk about sustainable finance in the Danish banking sector and links to the tech agenda. This is a special day at Finance Denmark because today we actually launched our first report on sustainable finance. I'll get back to that in a little bit. But just to say, sustainable finance has grown from being a really little French thing in banking in general to being really a dominant factor, and the EU has actually been quite a big first mover, I think, in sort of also pushing the private sector here, and we should acknowledge that. And so the sustainability and ESG, I also think you talked about that, Thomas, in your earlier remarks, has been big in investment for a number of years, and the Danish investment has worked seriously with this for many years. But this sort of is widening the scope to encompassing the whole banking sector. It's really something we've seen within the last couple of years. And also, and there's a whole agenda going on in the EU, which is very technical, looking at new directives. And I mention it now in my opening remarks because I won't really talk a lot about that. I could have spent all 15 minutes talking about new EU regulation, sort of trying to enhance the role of the financial sector in facilitating a sustainable transition of the European economy. But I won't do that. I'll talk more about what's going on actually in the Danish banking sector at the Danish bank and what we do together as a sector. So let that be my opening remarks. Just to present myself, I'm Niels Arne, Chief Economist at Finance Denmark, work with a long range of issues about the financial sector and how the financial sector interacts with the rest of the economy and the society. And the sustainable agenda is one of them. So as I just mentioned, today we launched this sustainability report, which really looks at what has been going on in the sector in 2020. And that's a very sort of very big reason why we have launched this report and it's these 20 recommendations from the Forum for Sustainable Finance to Finance Denmark. Let me start with a few words about the forum. We realized back in 2018, when we in earnest really started working with sustainable finance as an agenda that would have an impact on the whole financial sector, that we needed some input. At that point, I think it's fair to say that the Danish financial sector was not really at the forefront of sustainable finance. We had ambitions to move in that direction, to join the leaders here, be coming from a country that, in a whole range of other sectors, have a strong position when it comes to sustainability. So we gathered a forum to get input. We gathered we brought some experts from our own sector, but also from other parts of the private economy in Denmark, other big sectors important for when it comes to sustainability and sustainable transition. But we also brought in NGOs, we brought in academic experts to get sort of all views on sustainability and what requirements that would put on the financial sector to be an important player in the sustainable transition. And they worked. They had a range of meetings. We also had a special meeting actually on looking at startups and how we could use also the new digital and green tech solutions, how we could sort of interact with that from the financial sector. The forum met throughout 2019. At the end of 2019, in December, they delivered these 20 recommendations to Finance Denmark, that is, to the financial sector in Denmark. Here are 20 things you can do to improve your impact on the sustainable transition. And one of these recommendations was that we should issue an annual report to sort of document how we progress on this agenda. And that's what we launched the press today. So the next couple of minutes, I'll sort of present some key insights in what has actually been going on in this sector with some very fresh results. So a key recommendation is that it's sort of, and it's maybe an obvious one, but it's not where we were in the sector 3 years ago. Is to really integrate sustainability across in the business model across business areas with the bank. So it's not just a CSR exercise, but something that really impacts. And there's some interesting numbers. We just released it. It's only in Danish, so so the next couple of graphs will be in Danish. So I'll try and convey the key messages. So going into 2020, 1 in 4 banks already had core strategy for how to incorporate sustainability. By the end of the year, it was 1 in 3, and now 3 out of 4 banks either have a strategy or they're working on one, right? To really integrate this in business. So it's something that's really moving as we speak. And what does it mean? And that's sort of the next big question to have sustainability as part of your business model. Well, if you think about banks, I mean, there's a lot happening, and just look at the whole tech aspect that you know more about probably than I do, right? But how that has impacted the banking in the past decade, and it still is. But if you really look at the heart of the financial sector, I think it's still fair to say that it's sort of about 2 things, right? It's about allocating resources, and it's about managing risk. And in that sense, sustainability, and especially climate, is a huge part of sustainability right now, just because it's one of the most urgent things to address. It's one of the things about the climate is that it's impacting risk, and hence, it's really about what banks have been doing. It's a new factor into a key element of banking and managing risk. And that is really what we see now, that the banks are taking the climate and sustainability related measures into the risk management. So it's really at the heart of banking. And it shows up in various places. Right? There's politically motivated risks, right? Because of this transition, how will this play out? Will it be sort of a smooth, orderly transition that we start now, or will we will there be sort of a delay, and things will sort of heat up at the end as we see the consequences of not dealing adequately with the climate risks. All these things, I mean, and this is sort of what we call the transition risk. And then we have physical risk, right? That no matter, even if we do all we can, we still know that there will be changes to the ecology, to the climate over the next decades, and that will have an impact back on the economy and on the banking sector through the economy. So managing all these risks is and using a lot of data in that process is a key task that's being right now dealt with the bank. Then we have sort of what we see more from a consumer perspective is that the sustainability, climate factors are being taken into the advice, the dialogue between advisors at the banks and their clients, be they the private clients buying homes or buying cars, or be in the business who need to transform their business model to be to align with the sustainable transition. And it's not just about advice, it's also about developing products that help facilitate this transition for the customer. So we've seen a number of new green and sustainable products, be they lending products, investment products, being developed and put on the market in the past year, and we see much more in this year and in the coming years. So in our survey with our members for this report that we launched today, 8 out of 10 members have developed and launched new green and sustainable products within this past year. And the last bullet I have here is one that is just one item that one area of sustainability transition that's really prevalent right now, and it's the energy improvements of housing and of buildings and property in general. 1/5 of carbon emissions in Denmark are related to our property, so it's an obvious area of interest and something that we need to address. And let me talk just a little bit more about that. So here the graph on the left just show you, right, that at more than 9 out of 10 banks in Denmark, advising on energy improvements when they talk to their clients about housing finance. It's happening. Yeah, it's happening at more now. They're improving this, so it's becoming more and more integrated in the dialogue between banks and customers when it comes to property. And here we have a unique situation in Denmark just because of how much data we have on all parts of the economy, and that includes our housing. So we have the digital housing registry, the DDR, and we also have supplementary information on energy consumption at the houses with the Danish Energy Agency. So combining these two digital sources of data, you can actually make a good head start on informing the dialogue for the individual household on what is the situation, what does energy efficiency look like at your house, and using this information to actually identify specific projects that can be initiated to improve energy efficiency, and hence also that's good for the economy of the individual client, but of course of the aggregate. This is also something that's paramount if we want to obtain the goal of the 70% reduction in carbon emissions by 2030. And on the right, you see that basically all banks now have developed these digital advisory robots that will assist this dialogue and identify viable projects, improving efficiency, and also then of course providing finance, relevant finance to realize these projects. So this is just one example of really where our rich data in Denmark and the very digitized financial sector go hand in hand to actually assist and facilitate the sustainable transition. We've also looked at talked to specific sectors. One sector that immediately comes to mind when we talk about a sustainable transition in Denmark is the agricultural sector, and it's a sector where also there's a lot of interaction between the agricultural sector and the financial sector. And when it comes to, especially when it comes to the climate, carbon emissions, of course, there are some really specific issues going on in the agricultural sector. And again, so the SIGIS, which is sort of the think tank of the agricultural sector in Denmark, they're working really on becoming a world leader in measuring techniques that also involves a lot of digital solutions. And the financial sector is following this closely because we need that data to show and also assist the Danish agricultural sector in going through their transition. So this is again an important area again of combining data, digital solutions that allows the sectors to join forces. So I've been talking a lot about carbon emissions, and of course that's for a reason, and it is that this has become a key political priority in Denmark. And just a few words on that before I sort of go further into this. Important part of what we've been talking about, also back to the forum that I mentioned in my opening remarks, is that sustainability is not just about climate, and it's not just about the environment even, right? It's also about social issues, about an inclusive growth and inclusive transition to a sustainable economy, and it's also about good governance. And we see these other factors also, and we work with these also in our European forums. This will be an increasing part also of the EU focus on sustainability as we move forward. But there are obvious reasons why we started working with the climate challenge, we could call it. And so that has been also a sort of a natural starting point for the work in the Danish financial sector. And given the work we did already with our forum in 2019, we had sort of a good starting point when after the new government launched these climate partnerships with the different parts of the private economy and society. And we wrote this report together with the insurance and pensions that we just heard from, and what's now called the active owner, the former DVCA, which really sort of lays out how we as a sector will contribute. And again, emissions in the financial sector are really not worth talking about. They're so small they don't even figure in when we measure them against the other parts of the private economy. So it's really about how we impact the whole economy through the financing we provide to other parts of the economy. Now, one of the initiatives we've been working a lot on is how to measure these emissions from what we finance, be it through lending or through investment that we facilitate. So here we were inspired by some important work done in the Netherlands in the past years. And so through 2020, we worked hard with our members and joint forces also with insurance and pension on developing these frameworks for how to measure and calculate the emissions from all the activities that we finance through lending and investment. And we launched that in November of 2019. of 2020, sorry, and it's now being sort of implemented with the Danish banks, this method of measuring the emissions that they finance. And I think, and that got some attention also from also with the government, who asked us to then lead, because they saw all these reports that came from the partnerships from the different parts of the private economy, was that we need a common language for measuring carbon emissions. And we need metrics, we need a way to do this that's uniform, and so we sort of speak the same language, be it in the dialogue between banks and firms, between firms and their customers and NGOs, and with politicians in Denmark and in the EU. And so we've had an intense and giving dialogue with the other parts of the economy, the other climate partnerships, the other big organizations for the other part of other sectors and authorities. And the result of these discussions that ran throughout the first quarter of this year came with these 11 recommendations on how to measure carbon emissions. This is something that, because again, with data, right? Your methods are only as good as the data you put in. So this is really about creating an even richer data environment.
So Nils-Arne, just a few. We're running out of time.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
We just need a small break here, so 1 or 2 minutes.
Oh, sorry. Okay. So I'll speed through this. This is just really showing you, right, that we all depend on each other for data. And there are some ambitions, right? If we can create these, it's called a, data portal, where we can sort of all can interact, right? So we don't have to calculate and provide the same essential data multiple times, and certainly not in different ways, but get one standard and one medium of exchange for this data on carbon emissions. So I'll spend the minutes I don't really have. I'm sorry, Thomas, for going over time. So what we'll be looking at in the sector here in 2021. So reporting standards is a big thing, and this is linked to a new what's called the non-financial reporting directive that's being developed now in Brussels in the EU, which will sort of lay the land for how all businesses, how all the larger businesses have to report also on key factors, including carbon. I talked about this CO2 model, so we'll now try to improve that with our members. Some of them already have first experience in actually using it. And then for my colleagues who work on investment funds, investment products, they set out some actually ambitious plan to align investment products across the board in Denmark to align that with the Paris climate target. And we'll sort of follow up on that. Just a few final words, Thomas, if you will allow me, that I was asked also to talk, what's going on, not just on the sustainability agenda, but more broadly speaking on digital. And here are just 4 priorities, right? We still work to improve digital user experience with human-computer interaction. These factors are certainly something that's taking a lot of attention with the Danish banks. Danish banks were early movers in digitization. That also implies we have a lot of legacy issues while complexity is growing, which is improving general efficiency and digital solutions for the bank is still a key priority. The last 10 years after the financial crisis, we've seen a vast increase in the amount of compliance we have to do. And I've already talked about the importance of risk management and new factors impacting risk. So this is also a key area of work to do on the digital agenda with the Danish bank. And finally, cybersecurity is something, that's just a battle we cannot be allowed to lose. Ultimately, trust is is one of our most important assets. And that's sort of strengthening that trust is also having adequate amount of cybersecurity. Sorry for going over time, Thomas.
That's okay. So thank you very much. That was a really excellent from to both Sia and you, Arne. So I will now take not take 5 minutes from you, Anders, but I will just let us start like 15 minutes past, so everyone has 4 minutes to get out and fill up the coffee mug and come back here. So exactly 15 minutes past 10, we will start again with Anders from University of Copenhagen, followed by Mogens and Fritz, professors at the university. Then I will give a little bit a short intro to what follows next, and that is our process around getting proposals for projects or other activities that we can possibly fund through the economic stronghold and the national strength position that we have become. A process around that, and then we'll leave a little bit time for open questions for those of the panelists that are still left here. So exactly now, 15 minutes. You got 3 minutes now. Thank you. All right. It is now 15 minutes past. We won't cut down on time. We have a little bit of slack here, so no need to cut down on time. We'll just eat a little bit of the time we have left for questions. So, Anders, I will leave the virtual stage to you to take it away and explain a little bit about the University of Copenhagen and your research priorities and perspectives.
Yes, thank you very much. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Yes. All right. Yes, thank you, Thomas and Simon. My name is Anders Palskyt. I'm head of business innovation at the Department of Computer Science, and I'm also manager of the Science AI Center, which covers all the departments at Science and promote and develop collaboration across all of the university in artificial intelligence. So I have a broad role at university. Me and my team will serve as a contact point from the University of Copenhagen to Copenhagen Fintech. So I will be a contact point if you can't find the right contact person. Our associate dean, Lisa Lett, will be in the board. And in a minute, you will meet those who it's all about, our research leaders, Mogens Steffensen in insurance mathematics and Fritz Klein in computer science. So KU, I just switch slides, is the largest university in Scandinavia, founded in 1479 with almost 40,000 students, 5,000 graduate every year. And we're good in the rankings, as you can see here. In the general rankings, we're quite high. And in the specialized rankings, such as the CS rankings, we are also really high in different areas. And we have 9 Nobel Prize winners. And we also have a Turing Award winner. That's the computer science Nobel Prize. That's Peter Nau, who got it in 2005. So we have some really high esteemed researchers across times. So we have 6 faculties, and almost all of the faculties are relevant for the financial and technology sector, as you can see here. And I've just brought some of the departments that are relevant for fintech, anthropology, communication, computer science, economics, food and resource economics, law, mathematics, physics, psychology, sociology, and maybe also other areas. And at the university, we have a strategic focus on digitalisation and sustainability. So I was delighted to hear the focus from you, Thomas, and also from Finance Denmark and Pension and Insurance. You focus on green finance, on ESG and sustainability. And I agree, this is there's a huge case for this, and a lot of opportunities for research and innovation. We have different areas. I won't mention all of them, but one of them is quantum computing, where we have some different departments that have some really high esteemed researchers, both at the mathematics, physics, and computer science. We have research in some of the areas that were mentioned by the presentations before. For instance, prevention and predictive analysis. We made some work with COVID-19, both at computer science and mathematics, in, for instance, radiology, rehabilitation. And Thomas mentioned the work we did with NASA, counting trees in Africa. So that's really interesting. Furthermore, things like ethics, fraud detections, and so forth is also very relevant for us. So we work across disciplines. We made an education about computer science and economics, very relevant to the fintech. And I'm in the second year of that now, so there's going to come a lot of students from that education for the fintech sector. And we have different research areas. One of them I've mentioned is machine learning and natural language processing, where we link computer science and linguistics, but we also combine it with other research areas such as law and business processes, and we apply it to sectors such as the financial sector, to detect harmful content on the web, to develop recommendation systems. We work with a large insurance company about that, and we develop automated business processes that are compliant and adaptable to new financial regulation. So there's a lot of the research we are doing also in collaboration with companies that I think is very relevant to Copenhagen Fintech. So, and as this meeting was going on, we have just announced that we are our new AI research center. We got 350 million Danish kroner for an AI research center, and we hired one of the big shots within AI research across the world, Serge Belangi, who will come from Cornell and join us in Denmark. He will be at the University of Copenhagen, but at this AI research center we have made together with Aalborg, Aarhus, DTU, and ITU, with money from different foundations, the Basic Research Foundation and some private organizations. So with no further ado, I will give the word to Mogens to tell more about the research to do at mathematics. Thanks.
Do you see the screen?
We see it.
Also now?
Also now.
All right, so thank you. Yeah, my name is Mogens Steffensen. I'm a professor of insurance mathematics at the Department of Mathematical Sciences. I am coming here with only 3 slides on 3 rather different topics, all related to the areas that we have been discussing. I'll tell you a little bit about how I see a successful collaboration between university and industry can probably be designed. I'll say a little bit about what I see, what I consider is fintech, and perhaps even what is not fintech. And then I have 1 slide even on sustainability. This, although sustainability is not fintech per se, it seems like there's a lot of focus on what fintech can do to sustainability and vice versa. So I even have my last slide on that topic and how we see research potential within that area. So first slide. Well, I cannot shift the slide. Well, no, is there. So this is a model that have been used also to communicate industry university collaboration. So you can see one set here represents the University of Copenhagen KU partners sphere of interest. So of course out to the left you can see the standard success criteria of an academic worker. He wants to publish, he wants to make radical, basic, fundamental research, and he aims for academic status. And then on the other side, you can see the industrial partner sphere of interest. So exclusive to them is revenue, profit, and business volume, right? So that's what they aim for. That's what their success criteria is. But you also see in the middle that there is an intersection of joint interests where I don't have to read up or read loud all the words here. You can see at the bottom, perhaps the most important one, namely the power and passion to create. That should be in a core interest to both university and industrial partners. So my point about this figure here is to say that whenever you design a joint research project between university and industry, you should not necessarily focus only on the intersection. You could just as well focus on the whole union. So instead of narrowing down a joint project to contain only what is of core interest to both parties, you might as well put in elements that is primarily of interest to one of the parties and not so much to the other. And how do you agree on that? So you agree on that by saying that, well, if I as a researcher, I'm actually willing to give up some of my research time, some of the time I wanted to spend on basic research, I can do some consultancy work for you, right? So I tip in on your main interests, but you have to give me something in return. And what you have to give me in return is that I'm not only focusing on what is in the intersection within the whole project. I'm also allowed to spend time on basic research, and you should give me within the whole project, you should give me degrees of freedom to do that, right? So that's a trade-off, and to me, I think it's important to discuss this trade-off from the very beginning, and in order to agree that there is a balance between the consultancy offered and the degrees of freedom obtained from a researcher's point of view. So this is just an idea how to think about these different success criteria and how to cope with them, such that you actually build a joint project with a larger volume and with larger impact. So this is my slide on fintech and what it is and perhaps what it's not. To me, fintech is all different kind of things, right? So you have the individual, you have the authorities, and the authorities is thought of in a very broad way. So that's the supervisors and the politicians, the legislative decision makers, and then you have the financial institutions. And every arrow here is some kind of level of conversation, of some kind of dialogue. And there is perhaps a tendency to think that fintech is mainly a way that financial institutions, not necessarily old financial institutions, it can be new financial institutions, that a way that to communicate with the individuals. But to me, fintech is all different kinds of things. And the main collaborative projects that I've been involved in is pretty much on where the financial institution actually communicates with themselves. So they want to do something that they used to do, but they want to do that in a more efficient way based on novel technology. Right? So that's also fintech to me. And when they have to come up with new reporting ideas, new reporting, fancy reporting schemes to the authorities, that also draws on fintech, because it's as I write to the left here, it's technological innovation, is technology-driven, technology-based innovation somewhere in the financial environment. It can be marginal. It does not have to be radical to be called fintech. In my mind, it can be marginal. Obviously, when we are involved as researchers, there's a tendency that such collaborative projects are more radical than marginal. So to me, you can also see here out on the right that fintech is not necessarily disruptive. It can be, but it's not necessarily. It's not necessarily hard in the sense of difficult, and it's not necessarily dogmatic. So sometimes you also hear people think that fintech is the technology word for decentralization. But to me, that's not the way I see fintech. Fintech can be an innovation in the direction of centralization. It can be. My point is that it should be something which is to the benefit of the end user. And the end user is here the individual. But it's not necessarily dogmatic decentralization. It's not necessarily disruptive. It can be the financial institution doing something a little bit smarter based on technology innovation, as long as it happens to the benefit of the individual. My last slide on sustainable finance and how that relates to fintech. So what you have here on the left-hand side, it relates to much of what also Insurance and Pensions and Finance Denmark talked about. You can see here on to the left a figure from a first course on portfolio choice, right? So you have the whole idea that investment is driven by a concern towards expectation towards return relative to risk, and the whole sustainability agenda opens up a completely new path of thinking, both how we discuss portfolio choice. What are the dimensions in portfolio choice, and how are we supposed to discuss that with ourselves? So looking at the arrow that goes back to the financial institution, as asset managers, how do we discuss portfolio choice, but also with respect to the individuals, right? So you have very topical disclosure regulation where you are enforced to disclose information concerning ESG. ESG was discussed before, environmental, social, and governance issues. You have a EU taxonomy coming up on how you should classify environmental aspects, ESG aspects. The figures on the right is the new thing, and I think there is. I mean, I will not go through all of it. It's just to illustrate that we're opening up for new ways of communicating about these things, and also to some extent more complicated ways. So part of the task for fintech is to boil that down to something which is meaningful and does the job for asset managers, and also is meaningful and does a job for the individual. And how do asset managers, how do financial institutions communicate with ordinary people about these things? Right. So this I think there's a huge potential for innovation and research and development in these areas. And I mentioned that at the bottom. To some of the questions arising from sustainable finance, fintech will be the answer, because This is pretty much about data reporting, dialogue, communication. KYC stands for know your customer. So this is the whole idea about getting closer to your customer to produce loyalty among your customers. And that the fintech is not the objective here. It's a tool for getting there. And since, obvious reasons, it can play a role. So I could discuss more about sustainable finance. Of course, sustainable finance or the whole, at least the whole disclosure regulation, taxonomy regulation, is a regulation towards a greener world. But of course, it's what we call indirect regulation, right? So it's a matter of regulating access to capital. What we really want to regulate is, of course, the producing branches, right? They're the ones who should be sort of regulated, and they are by other regulatory rules. So the whole financial sustainability and the regulation around it is what we call indirect regulation. And there's a lot of research from financial point of view, from a financial mathematical point of view, and from a technological point of view to deal with in that area. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mogens. If I can get you to, yeah, exactly. And then I'll leave the floor to you, Fritz. Remember to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me and can you see the screen?
Both.
Excellent. So thanks for the invitation. This is an impossible job, of course. So what I'll compliment Anders and Mogens with is a small potpourri of computer science research. There's a huge amount, but I hope it gives you an idea of the kind of things we're doing and relate them actually to applications in fintech. So in my own background, I have been a computer science professor at DIKU, and I've been actually also the steering committee chairman of the Innovation Network for Finance IT, and I know, of course, Thomas and Simon and curiously also Anders and Mogens from an early project which actually is a research center on high performance functional computing for finance. So let's see. Let's give you an idea of actually a couple of these topics that we're dealing with. And I'll be quick, I promise, because I'll make the slides available. So the kinds of things we're doing in this relation is, for example, digitalized contracts and law, as already mentioned by Thomas a little bit in some of the chat. This has to do with the digitalization of actually the documents, not only data that are contained in contracts like paper contracts, but actually the processes that are described in them. You know, who has to do what, under which condition, at which time, and who has to pay or not pay in various circumstances. And that extends to law in the sense that there's rules formulated for that have to be abided by in contracts, including general terms and conditions. So what are these applications? For example, we have applications where the prospectus or the term sheet of the final terms of securities are modeled, and then actually they are being designed and analyzed, such as bonds, derivatives, and structured products. And we then execute them automatically, both actually the process of the issuance, which is sometimes a distributed process of financial instruments like bonds, and their completely automatic life cycle management, so validation of payments, of delivery, of atomic execution, of those things. This is also applications in insurance as a service. So just to complement a little bit some of the things that Sigrid is doing and has talked about already, is using AI and various techniques and tools for doing claims management. A very modern, interesting area that people are interested now, especially the big reinsurance companies, is insurance funding. So usually you have to buy in capital. They're interested actually in getting investors to provide by buying a form of bonds. So this, of course, requires regulatory interfaces and the ability for investors to analyze the policies, policies of contracts and laws. Also, we're doing work on natural language processing for rule extraction. So the descriptions are in natural language. So how do we automatically turn them into formal descriptions that then can be handled by computers? Compliance checking, as mentioned, there's lots of things that have to be checked, and understanding aspects in the formalization of laws. And formalization, you got to really think of as writing actually the text of the laws down, but they're written down in a computer language that has well-defined semantics and is consistent with the natural language semantics, and then actually is automated. So Distributed ledger technology, we are working with various technologies for distributed data and processes, not only blockchain, but that's a major area with distributed decentralized systems group, including classical, permissioned, systems used a lot in the financial sector like Corda. Ethereum is a replicated state-based blockchain system, but also classical replicated database systems or structured peer-to-peer systems. So what's the point of that one is how do people and banks and investors interact with each other, how to provide a platform that provides real-time streaming. So, and some of the applications we're working with is high-performance contract lifecycle management, and also high performance crypto, not only crypto resource management. Actually, some of the applications are definitely just fiat, real money or real securities or non-fungible or fungible tokens, and with including methods for doing transactional exchanges like payment for payment, delivery versus payment, including netting. So there's also applications in sustainability. For example, for trade finance, we're doing tracking and tracing. So as you can see here, as a master's thesis that developed algebraic basics and applications for coffee tracking all the way down from Colombia to your cup. Eventually, we're planning on some demos, and doing this in a secure, privacy-preserving fashion, including auctions. Functional high-performance computing. This is actually where some of the collaborations that we had here started. Hyperfit, which has moved on into a high-performance functional programming language that generates very high-performance GPU kernels, multi-CPU. So basically, you write down your code, and it can do applications in finance, so for stochastic simulation, for pricing risk, but presently it's mostly used in image processing or in deep learning applications. Deep probabilistic programming is a combination of using machine learning. So you got to think of it as machine learning with probabilities, which means, like, properly speaking, it's not only, recognizing that what you're looking at is a cat, but actually getting a probability statement about how likely is it to be a cat as opposed to a yacht. And this is based on the combination of probabilistic programming and, the deep part of deep learning is actually backpropagation, also called automatic differentiation. There's lots of applications, and these are some of the ones we've actually applied and applying and doing. So just to make sure that, because I know Thomas is looking at the clock here. So to give you an idea of, this is just a little potpourri. So there's a number of contacts, and we have a huge center, as you heard, for AI, ML. And so the single point of contact for all of those is Anas, and it's fantastic. Anas is here and playing this role with his background at in CEFIA, as it was called in the old days, Copenhagen Finance IT region and the Innovation Network. And we have, Christian is heading the AI. It's a huge center, there's many people. Then for the other areas, I'm listing a couple of faculty. So think of it as faculty sparring partners. Doesn't mean they're doing all the work. I'm listed twice here. And but we are the ones who can maybe discuss, projects like Moons was pointing out, how to do that and how to make sure that there's alignment of interests and we establish a goal and achieve it. And then, communicating this with colleagues, for example, who are the right partners then. That was what I had to say. I hope you got an idea. I can put the slides online so you can see some of the names. I'll put the link in the chat. So as I said, Anas is the single point of contact for all of science, and in this sense also for University of Copenhagen. And I'll be happy to serve, but please contact people directly with the names, you've seen them. But otherwise, I'll be happy to serve as a sparring partner if you want to. And that's what I had to say. Thank you.
Great stuff. Thank you so much, Fritz. And I think especially the last slide there was really, really good to get an overview of who are the key persons within University of Copenhagen and science. There's a lot of industry people on this call also. So I hope a lot of you guys will connect afterwards and couple of questions on also making the slides available. We will definitely do that. I can see Fritz already made his available. Efficient, Fritz. That's the way to do it. German efficiency.
It's more Danish than German now. It's a little bit American in there too. And don't forget the Dutch part.
All right. But really, really great presentation. Oh, what a... You're still sharing your screen, Fritz. So
sorry,
maybe...
I'll unshare the screen. And I'm
That's how it goes.
Yep, sorry about that. Thank you.
Not at all. That's good. So that I think that's also because you talked a lot about the different projects that we have been doing in the past, and I think that's a perfect segue for me to just take it into a little bit what happens now, what's the next step. And I think it's also very important for us to underline that we are starting out now with a little bit more in-depth presentation of what's going on at the University of Copenhagen. The plan is, and I'll get back to that a little bit later, to have all the different knowledge partners and universities in Denmark present what they're doing in this field and make sure that we develop that network within the different universities so we can connect the dots. We are in the process of hiring a profile that would be dedicated solely to that work also. So more on this hopefully soon will be announced. Let me just share my screen here. And now the question everyone have to ask. Do you see my screen? Good. Good. All right. And you also hear me, so that's great. Let me segue from Fritz and talk about what they've been doing and the projects that and many of them Fritz have been involved with in the past. Till the economic stronghold and the strengths position, finance and IT that the Copenhagen Fintech is now operating, which makes us able to fund some of these smaller research projects that can be basically, I think what Simon and Anders also said, can be looked at as seed projects for something hopefully much bigger between the universities and the industry. So in that work and in our application for operating that strengths position, we've been formulating these 7 areas of focus. That doesn't mean that we cannot do something outside of these 7 areas. It means, and they are quite broad, so I think they will cover most, means that these are some of the areas that we will be focusing extra on in our work with the industry and the universities. The implementation of AI and machine learning, I think it's quite obvious after seeing the presentations now why, and also some of the chats and the comments that's been going on the site, that this is clearly an area that is super interesting for the industry to work together with universities on. And I think we already had some chats around the whole application of ethical AI and the practical how on that. Definitely IoT and insurance, there's a huge use case there. So this is one of the topics we will be taking a deeper dive in also. Big data, super data rich sector, and I think especially when it comes to sustainability, and I think Niels Arne and Sigrid also touch upon that. Digital currencies and payments, and it just strikes me now, and I'm sorry for that, we will make sure to translate this also. It just strikes me that this is in Danish also, but translation is coming up. Digital currencies and payments, including blockchain, and I think this is one of the areas that Fritz is doing a lot of work in and has been also been doing research projects in blockchain-based digital currencies. Regulation and compliance, obviously a big field where the application of technology really matters. Open banking, we talked a lot about that. So the whole, and I think the open banking is much more than just banking. This is about open finance and making data available for third parties and accelerating innovation in the industry and beyond the industry. And then last but certainly not least, sustainability. And that especially Niels Arne also talked a lot about, but it's a huge topic for the industry. So if you combine that and also take into consideration what I talked about in the 4 thematic trends, that what we see right now, we think there's a perfect link. So these are the 7 areas of focus that we will look into during the next 4 years, where we run this economic stronghold. So this is just for you to have in the back of your head when we talk about possible research collaborations and projects. So what we will be doing now, I'm just looking at my watch to make sure that we also have time for questions. What we will be doing now, and what we will make public and send out to all the participants here in the call, but also make public, is a way of expressing interests in possible projects between, and everyone. It's a totally open call, so everyone in the industry or on the research side can fill out this form that will be made available, and there's an where you can express your interest in research projects. I just put in a link because that's an example of one of the projects we've been running previously when we were an innovation network. That was a research project between one of our fintech companies, Earnit, that did an IoT, a virtual piggy bank, and together with Force Technology, also one of the research partners or knowledge partners here. So they were doing some security testing on that IoT project. That is available. So that's just one example, just to give a very concrete example of what that could be. In the form, there will also be a little bit more explanation about what a project cannot be, but also what it can be. So hopefully that would be a little bit of a guideline when you come up with ideas for potential projects. So that's one thing. Another thing that we're also able to support are what we under, and maybe that's not 100% correct headline, but I call it hackathons here. It can be more. This is one of the activities that I know Fritz has also been involved in on the blockchain summer school, a highly successful initiative. This is just taken from the 2019 summit. And in connection with the blockchain summer school, also the Nordic Blockchain Summit, that's been done in a collaboration between the IT University, the Copenhagen Business School, and the University of Copenhagen. So that's just one example of some of the activities that we would also like to support, and where you also can use the forum to come up with different ideas here. Just to give you a little bit of an overview of what it is that we are doing here. So if you see this as a yearly timeline, you can see that we will be kicking off the year when it comes to these research and innovation sprints, that we call it, where we try to give you an overview and take different deep dives into different topics. This is the first, so therefore it's been quite overall. We'll try to give you insights into what is happening in different Danish universities that is relevant for the industry, and also take deep dives into what are the industry looking into, what are the pain points, and also over time develop that network within the knowledge institutions and the universities that makes us able to connect the dots between the different faculties at the different universities. We will be hosting monthly knowledge sessions, as we call it, Fintech Tuesday. So keep an eye out for those. We had one yesterday with approximately 100 participants, where we had DTU and one of their professors speaking about quantum computing and their initiatives there. We had Trifork, a Danish tech company, and talking a little bit about how they see it from an industry perspective and application of quantum technology in finance. So that's just one example. So following this sprint, we will have the calls, and the deadline for this call will be end April, where we would like to get ideas in for the next period, this coming period and the next. We also like to throw we will do these sprints twice a year, so in fall and autumn, where we also have, following those, we also have calls for projects or activities. And that's why I put in also fintech hackathons or similar, like the blockchain summer school and the blockchain summit, as an example of activities we would like to support. And on the side of this, because this is just to give you an overview of how it's all connected on the kind of the research side of it. We will have a lot of different other activities. So check in with our event page, check in on our sign off for our newsletters to get the latest updates, because we run between 200 and 300 different events and activities and webinars and masterclasses and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot more than this, but this is just to give you a kind of a connection, how it's all connected with the sprints now, the calls, the monthly knowledge sessions, the hackathons. And also one thing I forgot to mention is that we will also be holding these trend seminars. So a way of updating both the industry and the universities and knowledge institutions on what are the fintech trends. So doing a little bit more in depth what I was doing in the beginning, taking some of the global trends down to a Nordic and a Danish context and say what's going on in the ecosystem, also twice a year. Speaking a little bit about the governance model here, just so you know. So Copenhagen Fintech is a non-for-profit and association. Our board consists of Insurance and Pension, Finance Denmark, the Finansforbundet, and the Confederation of Danish Industries. We have some board members from the industry, from Jyske Bank, Vækstfonden, and Velliv. And then we have 3 member elected representatives that are, in this case, or this year has been 3 startups. And then we also have 2 university representatives, Lise from KU and Thomas Pallesen from Aarhus University in our board. So what will happen is that we will be giving these sprints where we provide insights. We will have the open calls. We will receive the calls and perhaps maybe get back to some of you guys to get to elaborate a bit on your ideas. Hopefully we will also see, and that's one of the aims we have here when we talk about these projects, that the industry will also contribute financially to these projects. So that is also something we will be looking into when evaluating and assessing those projects. We will have a group within the board that will be looking at the different projects. So there will be especially the universities and the associations together with Copenhagen Fintech that will be looking and evaluating the different ideas and suggestions for projects, and then selecting for the next period. So just to give you a little bit of an overview of how the governance model is for the cluster and our selection model for the different projects. So so that's pretty much on what happens next. That probably gives, and I will just check stop slide sharing here, and let's see if I can do this. Yeah. And then open up for a bit of questions. I'm a little bit unsure whether everyone can actually ask just open questions or they have to write them in the chat. I'm not completely sure. But I'll open up for questions for all the panelists here. So for Niels Arne, Simon, Fritz, Mogens, Anders, me, whatever there might be. If there's any questions, we will share the slides. We will also record this session. It is being recorded. So we'll also make that available for you to watch again or to share with colleagues. Any question, guys? Or that was just maybe crystal clear what happens now.
Can I ask a question, Thomas? Maybe for Niels Arne.
Definitely.
Niels Arne, if you should prioritize something that we should do at the universities and look into some of the big agendas, challenges, and so forth, what would that be?
That's a tough one, I mean, I myself am not working so much on the digital front. There are other colleagues here at Finance Denmark who would know that better. For this purpose, I work mainly on the sustainable finance agenda. And here it's really, it's a lack of, we haven't converged on how on the metrics. So just to say, I think really the issues are more of a political sort of nature, coordination game than lack of scientific results. certainly, I mean, I'm an economist, right? So this whole how the sustainable agenda interacts with, you know, common results from finance, how it impacts on returns, on risks. I mean, that's a huge agenda, right? And which is really interesting. And of course, there's sort of also, we touched upon that, right? That this whole, how do we integrate all the data we have to find the answers that we're looking for, right? And I mean, I think we have some unique opportunities in Denmark, given the richness of our data, not just on persons, but all a whole range of aspects. But I mean, we can still go further there, right? How do we produce and the right data and make them available? And of course, I think maybe a really interesting issue is once we move beyond. I mean, carbon emissions is conceptually easy, right? It's one thing we sort of by now we more or less agree on how to measure it. So there's some technical issues, but when we go beyond that and think about other questions related to the environment, sustainability, biodiversity, and the circular economy, so sort of this recirculation of our resources. I mean, then you have a whole new range of questions that are conceptually much more tricky, right? So how do we provide good metrics for this? Just, you know, conceptually, and then how do you implement this? I think that's really interesting, and go even beyond the environment. We have the whole social benefit. How do you want to? I mean, how do you measure that in a meaningful way? And what can we? I mean, can we make some clever use of you know, indirectly measuring this through the data that we have available? Here, that lots of open questions. That was a bit unclear and probably high level, but I hope this sort of gave an idea of certain way I think we need to step up.
I can put a comment on that as well, Anders, and also I saw there was a question from in the chat from Anders Forse around applications for projects. So I think a comment from our side is that what we have highlighted here, Thomas, and the industry has highlighted, is some of the pain points. What we would like to see in projects is project where the industry is very much involved. We would like to see active participants from the industry. We would like to see co-funding and engagement from the industry in the projects, and we see it also as our role as kind of in the question in the chat for matching, trying to become the matchmakers between the industry and research in that. This is the first sprint. I think the next sprint we will have more of an ongoing process leading up towards the sprints where we are in dialogue with industry and researchers. So the kind of the projects formulated will probably have stakeholders from industry and research. So I think that's what we hope, that the kind of applications or ideas we get, that there are engaged partners from industry and research in them, and that will be prioritized. We know that this is a bit of a kind of late start for the first sprint, so I think we will have to kind of some of the ideas we will have to run through, and we will have to do some matching to answer the question from Anders Forse. How do you match us? How will you be matched up with industry? We hope some will come out of this directly, but otherwise we hope that the form will be kind of an idea or just a way of reaching out to us, so we can take the dialogue with you on who do we think would be the right partners to take on, and then there will be a process. It'll have to be quite a quick process for now, but I think for the coming period, these processes will be leading up towards the sprints and also a bit after the sprints. Hope that answers some of it, but it is the first version of this sprint session, I think. Probably also easier if we actually were in the same room, some of us.
All right, we are actually on the spot 11. So I think in respect of everyone's time, I will say first and foremost, thank you to all of the different speakers. This is, as Simon said, the first sprint of a series of many different interactions in many different contexts, hopefully between the industry and the universities and other knowledge partners. So thank you so much to the panelists or the presenters. Thank you so much for all the attendees. And we'll make sure to slide everything. And yeah, just have a great day and take care out there. Bye.